What's going on, Packer fans? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. It is officially Friday, which means we are joined by the one and only Mike Wahle. Mike, welcome back. How the heck are you doing? How have you been? What's new?
Oh, great. Like we were just talking offline, just Black Monday just started off this whole week of me uh mindlessly getting on Twitter, watching TV and just having these like thought experiments about why these franchises can't get their culture right.
It's fascinating. It really, really is. I'm so I'm incredibly intrigued by what happens in Chicago and Minnesota from GM to head coach, as we were talking a little bit about Chicago offline. But Jacksonville is going to be incredibly interesting to see what happens there. It already seems like a little bit of a interesting move of keeping Trent Baalke around and the fan base not being happy with that. It's going to be like this entire offseason. I know it feels like every offseason gets exponentially crazier and more quarterback movement than ever and more player movement and coaches moving. And it just feels like you almost end up with, I don't know, 30 of the 32 teams almost being entirely different the next year. I think this one's going to be another crazy one. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the news coming out of the Dolphins and knowing some guys that work in Miami, worked there for years, that was absolutely mind-blowing. But it speaks volumes about where you position yourself as a franchise. How do you align yourself? Obviously the big discussion was about Tua. Like we came out as soon as that firing was happening, like the people that have ever been there, myself included, just came out. This is definitely a Tua thing. This is a disagreement on where they think the franchise is headed with him as quarterback. And the tough part about this as a former player is they did this to Tannehill, right? Tannehill was directly or indirectly responsible for the firing of a staff. And now Tua is that way. And you just look at it because, again, they've got a guy who's a real estate magnate, billionaire, genius running the program. And he's aligned himself with the general manager instead of the coach. And it starts begging the question of, like, why is a general manager more important than a coach in a franchise? Like, who's defining the culture of your organization? Is it the GM or is it the coach? I'm pretty sure it's the coach. So for that reason alone, I just don't understand. In a lot of these situations, the Baalke situation is another one. Like, not that they should have fired Urban, but why are these people there? The coach should be, you would think, as the steward of the culture of your franchise, he should be really involved in making all of these decisions. And it's like, I can remember Parcells going, like, how do you want me to cook dinner if I can't cook, buy the groceries?
The ingredients, yeah.
Yeah, the ingredients. But it's since then, since, Mike Holmgren went to Seattle, got the opportunity, Sherman in Green Bay, like, you really, I mean, Bill's done it for years, but you really don't see kind of the dual role. And you certainly don't see a situation where the head coach is kind of the man in position of power, at least externally. And it's always just, 20 years in the league, I've always just it's been a head scratcher for me.
It's really an interesting dynamic, and it's for a variety of reasons. I think, first of all, I know it hasn't exactly worked out all aces for San Francisco, but I think the bringing in of a head coach and GM together simultaneously as almost a tandem is the best way to go. I also think for all the everything that was discussed about Green Bay and the way that they set up their organizational structure with Mark Murphy sort of at the top, and then Russ Ball, Brian Gutekunst, and Matt LaFleur all reporting in directly to him. In a way, it does give equal say to salary cap resources, what the coach wants to say and what the GM wants to do. And I think it really does force the three of them to work together in a greater capacity than if you have it as a pure pyramid where it's owner, GM, and then, coach, and then salary, or whatever the case may be. So I think there's a really interesting way there. And I think we were talking again offline about the toxicity or the lack of culture. I think one of the things that's really maybe difficult that maybe lends itself to some of this is you do have all of these power players, right? You have the owner, of course, and then you have the GM, who in a lot of cases has say over the entire roster and things like that. And then you do have the coach, and those two so often get siloed off and maybe not on the same page and trying to win over the owner of saying my way is the right way, which is why you end up with some of these messy divorces. And then you also have the very weird, odd dynamic that doesn't really happen in other businesses, where you have the quarterback who is making more than any of the GM or the head coach or any of these guys. And if the quarterback becomes unhappy and says, I don't like my GM or I don't like my coach, a lot of times it's easier to find new coach and GM than it is to find that new quarterback. All of it just makes it so interesting. And I think that's why we end up with these weird divorces and all this lack of culture within NFL teams.
Yeah, certainly. And you think about it, an owner's got his bat phone, right? His red phone on the desk, and that only goes to one person. It's either the coach or the GM. There's not two phones sitting on that desk, and that's usually what the problem is in a lot of these buildings. Interesting point about your quarterback. If you look at the quarterbacks now in the league, we could probably argue about maybe 4 or 5 quarterbacks you think are capable of winning a Super Bowl right now.
Yeah.
Realistically, given kind of the structure of the NFL. And then you have this like swath of, I don't know, 14, 15 guys that you just now the difference between 1 and 14 is pretty significant, but they're all kind of in the same boat. And these questions about, who are you going to back as far as you're going to back the quarterback, the head coach, the general manager, it's very interesting to me now, because if you don't have one of those like 4 or 5, maybe 6 guys that are capable of winning a Super Bowl, then what is it all for? I mean, in other words, why would you ever align yourself with that person instead of trying to build a team that can win the Super Bowl and rely on the wellness of that team? Because like we've talked about before, like the pendulum swinging back, trench warfare is a little more important. Offense and defensive lines are going to play a huge role in this particular postseason.
Yeah,
now, I know we all think Aaron Rodgers is going to win. He's the best player that I've ever seen as far as from the quarterback position. Tom Brady's still in the running as the greatest of all time. So we have those guys there that are probably favorites. But you start looking at everybody else, like this is kind of going a little bit more towards the bandwidth and talent that the quarterback position is narrowing. And so the importance of the rest of the team is going to continue to rise. And when you have that now, that dynamic, I think, is going to start shifting back to, am I going to back that coach? Or am I going to back that GM? But at least that owner is going to be able to discern 2 instead of 3 power players, like you're saying, unless, of course, you're talking about one of those 4 or 5 guys.
And even when we talk about those quarterbacks, right, like Brady and Rodgers, I think we've seen, especially over the last couple of years, what Tampa and Green Bay have been able to do, building up the offensive line, building up the running back rooms. Fournette has been such a huge piece for them. Gronk as a blocker and pass catcher, definitely something that is super valuable as well. So I think all of that in some regards plays a huge piece of this as well. And just kind of getting all of the pieces around the quarterback. So it's not just Brady, it's not just Rodgers. In Green Bay, you've got the 2-headed monster as well with Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. I think they're trying to really build all of these pieces up to make sure that it doesn't have to just be the quarterback, and it can be team football, even in those dynamics, even when you have those guys.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we can talk about all this and certainly, but as Green Bay fans, we know, right, because we do have Aaron Rodgers that is going to be a 4-time MVP or whatever, and hopefully going into this postseason, it's all for naught if he's not under center. So, I'm kind of speaking on both sides of my mouth, but I do find it very interesting, these dynamics, certainly in what you talked about from an owner. I had an owner, just to put it in perspective, we had an owner in Carolina, the old owner. If a star player was upset with something the coach said in the meeting room, flip phone's coming out and he's putting them on speed dial. And you want to talk about a toxic culture, when your star players can go past the GM and go past the coach and speed dial the owner, well, that's a recipe for disaster, right? And then usually those things end poorly. Yeah,
it's a crazy NFL world out there, but I think Green Bay's pretty lucky to be in the place that they are in the current dynamic that they have. I want to get your thoughts on Packers Lions, though. And before we get into it, I think you and I were both in general agreement on Packers Vikings, that even though the Packers blew out that game, didn't mean a whole lot in the whole scheme of things with who Minnesota had on the field and things like that. I kind of got the same feel in this game, even though they lost this game, doesn't mean much in the whole scheme of things. But your thoughts on Packers Lions, what you took away from it and what it means moving forward, if anything.
Honestly, I kind of looked at it as the Packers' 4th preseason game. I didn't really look at anything more than that. You can look at the first drive. The best thing that came out of it was we got to see Bakhtiari back in the field. We got to see Josh Myers back in the field. We have news that Z Smith's practicing now, and we have news that Billy Turner's practicing now. Those things are of incredible importance to this postseason run. Having Bakhtiari out there, I'll just focus on him for a second, because he's arguably the best tackle in the game. He is from my, I'm a player development guy. And from my perspective, he is an absolute master at being the best at the basics of the sport. You look at his hip hinge body position, his footwork, his initial footwork, his hand placement, the way he targets, the way he can absorb and balance in his confrontation. He is the best. So he is not only a improvement from whoever's his replacement. So he might be 15, 20 percentage points on the field improvement better than the next guy. But what he does from a confidence standpoint, from a presence standpoint, from a communication standpoint with the rest of the offensive line, with the tight ends, and then in the confidence that Aaron Rodgers has in him, which now spreads out across the spectrum of the entire offense. Like, he is a force multiplier for that team, and it is monster that we got him back. So just if we take anything away from it, it's that I'm really happy to see those guys back, and I think that's really going to help the postseason run.
It looked like he was out riding a bike. Like, it did. I mean, it looked like he didn't lose a stat. He looked like David Bakhtiari. It's just incredible. The guy is just a freak of nature when it comes, like you said, to the fundamentals and what he's able to do. There are a handful of players that I just can sit in awe of and watch over and over with their craft of the game. And Green Bay is so lucky to have an Aaron Rodgers, a Jair Alexander, David Bakhtiari, a Devontae Adams, who are just so crafty and just pure technicians at their game. And it's a joy to watch. And David Bakhtiari is 1,000,000% on that list. And it's a literal set it and forget it. You put him over there and you don't have to worry about it anymore. And I think, as you mentioned, the communication too, there's plays out there already where he's pointing to different, defensive linemen and linebackers and communicating with the rest of the offensive line. For as well as Yash played, that's not going to be what Yash is out there doing, right? It's just another set of eyes, especially when you've got a potential rookie center playing at center, and John Runnion's in his second year. And yeah, you could still have Lucas Patrick, who's a veteran out there as well, but it's still definitely a relatively young and inexperienced line in certain spots. So to add that value in there too, I was geeking out over how he looked and how he played, even in 27 snaps.
Yeah, I just think it's so cool when you have elite level players in your room, what that does. And it's the work that we don't see, but the elite level players, when they're in your room, or if you could look at it from, you have the 4-time MVP, a Hall of Fame quarterback in your building, what that does to the development of the rest of the team. So we can take it to Bakhtiari and what that means from a preparation standpoint from Josh Myers or John Runyon Jr., like what they see from him and how that veteran leadership or that mentoring, how that impact that has on their career. You look at it from Aaron Rodgers' standpoint, and you look at you look at an Alan Lazard, you look at an MVS, like there are probably 20 or 30 of those guys across the league. I'm just talking about from a physical makeup, right? Yep. What separates them is now they've elevated their expectations and their ceiling because guys that are Hall of Famers. And when you play with Hall of Famers, your game's going to rise because your expectations for preparation change. And that's what's so cool about having really, really talented guys at key positions in your offense and defense. It's going to raise the level of preparation for the rest of the team. And therefore, your team's going to be that much better, not only like this next 4 weeks or 5 weeks, but moving forward for the rest of their careers. I think it's like that part of the legacy of culture building and mentorship within player to player relationships is monster.
One of my favorite things about the Packers is that they have that player at almost every position. Rodgers at quarterback, Aaron Jones at running back, Mercedes at tight end, Bakhtiari on the offensive line, Adams at wide receiver, Clark on the defensive line, Preston and Z on the edge, and Rashawn's certainly going to get to that point at one point as well. Arguably Devondre Campbell at inside linebacker, Jair at corner, Amos at safety, and even Crosby in the special teams room, who has over the course of the years raised the bar as well. They've got a leader and a mentor in every single one of those position group meetings. And it's really crazy to see how they're able to build that out and have that in literally every position group, which is just a testament to how they've built this team as well.
That's a really good point. It's very rare that you can go and look in any room and not kind of squint when you say that. And the fact that you can kind of name a person in every single room that you're going to get that mentorship, you're going to get that leadership, that process built way of finding success within the individual. That is really a testament to the job that Goody's done. And then also a testament to the job that this coaching staff and the coaching staff is throughout their entire career, but the coaching staff for the last 3 years specifically has done in developing that talent and developing a situation where those leaders are allowed to lead. The best teams in the world are player-led, right? They're coach framework, coach discipline, player-led. And you can just tell this is one of those teams. And I think that's one of the reasons they're probably favored right now.
1,000,000%. And we've heard Aaron Rodgers echo those same sentiments as well. We talked about Bakhtiari. What were your thoughts on Myers in this game? And then looking ahead to the divisional round, assuming everyone is healthy, how are you lining up the 5 offensive linemen from left to right if you're making that coaching decision?
So Myers is an absolute unit. I love him. Like, I've loved him since day one. I think he's just Corey Linsley too. Like, he'll be an all-pro in a couple of years. He just has that presence about him. He's strong, he's mobile, but he's just really, really heady. You can tell he's calm in there, has a great demeanor. So if I'm moving forward, it's a no-brainer for me. John Rennie Jr. has earned that left guard spot. I love the physical presence. We've talked about it all year, the physical presence that he brings. You need that, and you need that in the playoffs. So you need that demeanor, right? We don't really have that in other guys. Patrick is one of those guys that brings that demeanor to the game. He's just not quite as physically able, maybe, as John Rennie Jr., some of these other guys you see in the league. So I really like the idea. Patrick's had some success at right guard. He played right guard last year. He has that experience. He's more of a physical presence than Royce is. Royce is going to have a nice career. Like, Royce is an Ole Miss guy. He was well coached in college. He played in the SEC. He's ready to go. He's going to be different physically in 4 years than he is right now, right? That stuff takes time. So let's give him time. Let's really give him credit for the job he's done. And listen, if somebody gets hurt, he's going to be ready. But for now, having Myers back, having Bach back, like, it's very simple. Just John Rennie Jr. stays. Billy Turner's goodness is going to come back and play right tackle, because I think, I'm a huge fan of his. I think he does a great job in both the run and the pass game. And then you just put Patrick over there, because you're going to get in the playoffs when you kind of look at the guys inside that are going to really give you trouble. They're really more run stoppers. You might have to play Aaron Donald, but after Aaron Donald, you start looking at Arizona, you start looking at Tampa Bay, like the teams that might challenge the Dallas Cowboys, unless they go into their nickel package. You're not really seeing defensive tackles that are just, keeping me up at night. They're more of space eaters, right? So when you have space eaters like that, you just want your most physical guys in there going downhill, working on those double teams that we know the Packers are really good at.
That's a great point. We're in lockstep there too. I'm going Bakhtiari, Runyon, Myers, Patrick, and then Turner. If Turner's not ready, then going with Dennis Kelly. But either way, the fact that they were able to get so healthy, right before we started recording this, we got news as well that Whitney Merciless is now practicing for Green Bay. It is crazy that they are just potentially getting almost everyone back, save for basically Elton Jenkins at exactly the right time. It's on. Have you ever seen anything where, like, just all of a sudden you get 5, 6, 7 guys that are so important to your team back at all the right? I don't think I've ever seen anything like it.
Yeah, this has just been, with COVID and everything, this has just been a nuts year across the entire league. So we should definitely feel fortunate that we're getting these guys back healthy at this point. You look at teams that are entering into the playoffs feeling really good about themselves, and Dallas Cowboys, Jerry Jones is out there spouting off about how their expectations are really high, which they should be. But they're a very, very healthy team. And you look at some of these other teams across the board, when you lose key players at key positions, especially now in the playoffs at the offensive and defensive line, you're going to run into trouble, because all of these teams have some sort of kryptonite. Whether it's the Rams, their offensive line gives up pressures equal picks. Stafford's got a problem. Like, you can start kind of putting these things together and going, I can probably build out a very good model of who's going to win these playoffs by their offense and defensive lines alone. So being healthy along that board, to me, makes a huge difference.
It really does. It's incredible to see everyone get back at the right time. Hopefully everyone's able to kind of get their sea legs under them and start playing a little bit more in football shape. We saw that be a little bit of an issue with Bakhtiari, but even if they can play a handful of snaps, like, Z and Press, or excuse me, Z and Merciless, like, Garvin and Tipa played about a combined 25 to 27 snaps per game. Like, Preston and Gary are fine. If all of a sudden Z and Merciless can come in and handle those 27 snaps instead of Tipa and Garvin, that's a huge step up. If all of a sudden Jair can play 20 snaps in the slot instead of Chandon Sullivan in key third down moments, that's a huge improvement. Like, I just think there's a lot of opportunity to have incremental increases, even if these guys aren't 100%, if they can go out there and compete and add value, which I think they all will. I think it's already a more dangerous team. This is already the number 1 team in football during the course of the season.
Yeah, you nailed it. And when you think about it, especially on the defensive side, what is it that we've seen for the course of the year is when you put the second team in, whether it's the second defensive line or some of these backups at the defensive back position, teams are smart and they attack that, where they attack it downhill or they're able to kind of, have longer play action passes because you don't have that pass rush. So when those guys come in, that's when a lot of teams are getting yards. So being able to kind of supplement your first team right now with guys like Z Smith, guys like Whitney Merciless, like that is a huge deal because those are first team players, certainly, and stars in their own right. So now you're going from good to good, you're going from strength to strength. Not those other guys. Again, everyone's done an admirable job, but that's just these are facts, right? Like I would love to play against second team players all day if I had the chance. And so if you're going to put against, if you're putting against two starters against me all day, that's certainly a different way that an offensive lineman goes about thinking about how their game's going to go, how that day is going to go.
And so many times it's not even always about the strongest players on your team. A lot of times it's about the weak link, right? And I'm not, dragging anyone here, but we saw Tampa go right after Kevin King and Chandon Sullivan last year. And, if you have a weak link out there, teams in this case, when they're going, be above and beyond everything to game plan against you, they're going to find those things. And if you don't have answers for it, I think what a lot, and I've mentioned this earlier this week, what a lot of these players returning from injury does is it provides answers to a lot of questions that teams can ask with their best players. And I think it's going to be a huge, huge opportunity for this team. I do want to go over one more thing with Packers Lions, and that's of course the play of Jordan Love. A little bit uneven at times, I think a little unlucky at the end of the game, but what was your takeaway from Jordan and kind of his second extended action of his career?
The truth is he's a young quarterback. He didn't play the biggest ball in college, and he's a guy that's going to develop into, is he going to be in that top 5? The question is really, because he's replacing Aaron Rodgers, maybe eventually, is he going to be a top 5 guy, or is he going to be in that group of 14 or 15 quarterbacks that are kind of all in the same pool? And you would probably guess, given what you've seen so far from a physical standpoint, from a processing standpoint, speed standpoint, probably guessing that he's in that middle pool, which is not a bad thing. But it's not like you're going from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. It's different. And so if I'm an executive in the Green Bay Packers, if I'm the head football coach, I'm thinking to myself, I'm not willing to tie my future to anybody right now. Like, I guess what I'm saying is, how much of percentage of ownership does Aaron want in the Green Bay Packers in order to stay? Because, and that is not a knock on Aaron and Jordan Love. The fact is, I don't know, aside from maybe Herbert, I don't know if there's anybody we could bring in right now and go, oh yeah, that young guy looks like he might be Aaron in a couple of years. Let's go ahead and switch out. Like, there's just not another one like him. So it's just really tough to feel good as somebody whose job is dependent on the play of that quarterback. Historically in the Green Bay Packers lineage for the last 30 years, success is tied to that quarterback. It would be really tough to get away from Aaron Rodgers and put your stake in the ground for Jordan.
When you get your hands on one of those top 5 quarterbacks that can win it for you, you hold on to them like grim death and do whatever you can. And especially now, Tom Brady's broken the mold, right? You can play into your 40s and have success. And Aaron Rodgers is certainly seemingly to be on that same trajectory. If he's anywhere near capable of playing at this level for another 4 or 5 years, you let him do that, and you figure out all the stuff later on and buy yourself more time to potentially find that guy who could be a top 5 guy. And again, maybe it's Jordan Love a couple years down the road. Maybe you don't even get to that point because Rodgers is here long enough, whatever, but you worry about all that later. And in the meantime, whatever it takes to keep Rodgers, you probably do. As we start transitioning to the playoffs, I do want to get your take on just this kind of wild card weekend in general. What are you most looking forward to? What are you keeping an extra eye on? What are you hoping for from a Green Bay standpoint when the Mike Wall TV station and Man Cave is going on? What are you focusing on this weekend?
Well, I think that Monday night game is going to be great. The way that Aaron Donald took over the game last time, they're going to have an answer for them. But I like Kyler Murray over Stafford for me from a quarterback play in this situation. I'm just more excited to watch the Arizona Cardinals. So I'll be interested to watch that game. I want to love the Philly game because they run the ball so much, but it's Tom Brady. Tampa Bay's got a really good run defense. You just start going like, I don't know. He could be missing every single good wide receiver. It's still Tom Brady. I still think they're going to score. But going forward, is Fournette healthy? And how does he look? Yeah. How does that team look? And I don't want to say this is a warm-up game because, Philly could win, but it's tough to imagine that Tampa's going to go out on one. And then like the biggest game for me, honestly, is not in the NFC. I think the AFC game, the Vegas Raiders versus the Bengals. Like I think that's going to be a really good game, man, because those two teams are going to give up points. It's going to be like Cincinnati gives up a ton of points at home. And for me, Crosby and Ngakoue rush the passer really, really well. And Cincy's O-line is not good. And that kid gets hit a ton, and he could be actually getting hit more, but he's pretty elusive for, kind of given what his body type is. And so that could really factor into this game. So yeah, having 3 days in a row of football is going to be awesome regardless. And all the games mean something, but I'm really looking forward to that Vegas Cincinnati game, man. I think that's the first one to start the week off.
It is. It's a great way to kick off the weekend. And I'm looking forward to that one as well. I mean, Buffalo, New England, Saturday night football is fun. I think Dallas and San Francisco is another game that could be really interesting and sort of a contrast of styles.
What do you got there?
I have Dallas, but I don't feel good about it at all. I know a lot of people are picking San Fran in that game, and I'm not going to argue against them at all. Dallas is so up and down. They look superhuman one week, and then they look totally pedestrian the next at times. I think Dallas, but again, I don't feel great about that at all. How about you?
I really like if we're just kind of breaking down where we think we're going to win. Micah Parsons could be a game wrecker in this game, but then I start looking at like George Kittle's a game wrecker in this game. Like the secondary for Dallas, they've been opportunistic because they've been able to get upfield with those pass rushers and create havoc. Right, Diggs is jumping a lot of routes, so I would think Shanahan has some answers for that. I just think that the Niners are going to be able to score on offense. Deebo Samuel, like all these guys that they have at the skill positions, Garoppolo's going to be able to get them the ball. They're going to be, they have that great run game. Trent Williams is coming back. That play action pass off the run game is going to work well, I think. And then it just becomes a question of, I love Dak Prescott. Is he going to be consistent? Are they going to be able to run the ball? Like Ezekiel Elliott took him 17 games to get 1,000 yards. Like it hasn't been exactly what they thought it was going to be. And they just miss big plays when big plays are there sometimes. And then they have these games where like they'll drop 50 or some ridiculous number on like not a good team. And you kind of go, well, this is cream of the crop now. Like we're playing the best of the best. I don't know if they're going to have that kind of success against good teams and a team that's so strong on the offensive and defensive line as the 49ers. So it's a fun game to watch, but I might take the 49ers in this one.
It's really fun. I think the game changer here is Trent Williams' health. If he's fully healthy and ready to go, and he can help stop some of that Cowboys pass rush and be obviously the insane run blocker that he is. I think that changes things entirely for 49. If he's out, and apparently it sounds like he's going to play. Now again, playing up to the normal Trent Williams standards, based on health is something totally different. But if he's healthy and ready to go and looks like Trent Williams, that's a total game changer for me.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's. I wanted to ask you. Speaking of the playoffs, do you have a favorite playoff moment of all time from when you played?
Well, my first playoff game against the Niners was obviously like very, very special. And a funny story. Just we're talking about really dominant offensive linemen. So I'm going to play Dana Stubblefield. I think he's like the reigning NFC Defensive Player of the Year or something like that.
Sure.
Playing, Niners, and then they had BY on the other side. He was an amazing player. Excuse me. So my agent has Dana Stubblefield. So we have the same agent, right? So my agent calls me up and he's like, hey, Mike, do you want some advice on how to block Dana Stubblefield? Because at the time he's like one of the top guys. And I'm going, okay, give me some advice. He goes, you should watch Dana play against the Dallas Cowboys because this is like 2000, right? I'm like third year in the league or whatever.
Right.
He goes, fourth year in the league. He goes, yeah, you should watch the Dallas Cowboys. He seems to have bad games against the Dallas Cowboys. So I go, okay, yeah. So
just do what Larry Allen did.
Yeah, I turn on the tape and I watch it. I called him up and I go, listen, man, I love you. Don't you ever give me advice again. He's like, why? I go, because I don't bench 700 pounds. And Dana Stubblefield literally got the Larry Allen flu every time he played him, meaning that he was so scared to get his chest caved in by that punch that he wouldn't get anywhere near him. So that was a really special game. But I have to be honest, I remember the NFC Championship I played with Carolina and Seattle, but I really remember that damn 4th and 26 game. Like that offensive linemen remember negative stuff. Dude, I remember that game like the back of my hand. I remember every play in that game.
We're not going to talk about 4th and 26. We're not starting off the playoffs with bad juju. That is one of the more brutal ones for sure. But just go do it. I don't understand, Mike, why you just couldn't go out and replicate what Larry Allen did.
It was so funny too. He was like, he's not even rushing him. I go, yeah, because he's afraid he's going to get hurt. Like the Larry Allen, for people who don't know Larry Allen, Hall of Fame guard, but there was a thing in the NFL. The Larry Allen flu was real. Like defensive linemen would literally start on Wednesday going, I don't feel so, my shoulder hurt. I might need there was always something because they were literally afraid. I didn't believe it until I went to the Pro Bowl, and Larry was kind of like, at that point, I thought he was over the hill. And I remember one of the defensive linemen got down. He's like, Larry, please don't hurt me. And he was serious. And I was like, what? This is the Pro Bowl. They're actually scared of this dude. Like still, even at this age, like they're scared of him. It's crazy.
And those are the best of the best.
Yeah.
Those are the best of the best at the Pro Bowl. No, he was absolutely something else. One of the all-time greats. No question about it. And if you're going to replicate your game, go watch Larry Allen, see if you can do what he did. Though I wanted to ask you one other thing really, really quick before we let you get out of here and plug your podcast with Amon Green as well. But I saw you post this and I thought it is really great as well. The Rashawn Slater, Carolina Panthers, Matt Rule take of how they, he didn't look like an offensive tackle and stuff like that. I don't know about you. Rashawn Slater to me was one of the easiest evals as just a pure offensive lineman. And I thought he could hang at tackle. He was so fun to watch in college. He was so natural in his movements, so natural as a technician. And like to say like, well, he doesn't look like a tackle. Well, okay. Like, I don't know. I'll let you take the floor on this one.
You see some of these things. And again, we talked about this offline. Like, I don't understand how people get this far with making statements like that or decisions like that. Everyone's going to miss on a guy or two, but
absolutely,
it just kind of shows you that a lot of talent evaluators don't know really what they're looking at. Like they're worried about these ancillary things that mean nothing. Like these measurables are good to a certain extent, but when you look at an offensive lineman, if you want to know if an offensive lineman is going to be good, you start with two things. One, his body position. Can he like maintain what we just call a hip hinge, like an athletic position? Imagine you're starting your power clean, your snatch or something like that hip hinge position where your hips get pushed back, your posterior chain's loaded. Can you maintain your chest is a little bit down? Can you maintain that position throughout the course of a play? And then you have to look at their initial footwork. Like, are they able to gain leverage against their defender on every single play, like from every position? If the answer is yes, then all you need to find is a good coach and they're going to figure out. If you want a ready-made guy, now you just start looking at like lower body strength or power. Do they have good, inside hand? Like, are they good targeter? Do they seem to have a good header on their shoulders? Are they good communicators? Like, he's out the box ready. He was out the box. He was the best player in that draft. Everyone was talking about Penei Sewell, but Penei Sewell was a physical intimidator in college. He wasn't a technician. This dude was a strong, powerful technician. That is unbelievably valuable. And so for guys to, at that level, to say like he might have been a miss at a guard, or that's talking about how they have an athletic quarterback, so it was okay. Like that to me is just, I don't know if I would have admitted that to anybody else. That's all. Absolutely.
It's one thing to even like think it, but yeah, saying it out loud is another thing entirely. It was just a really, really odd comment from Matt Rule, the Panthers head coach. Who had a better rookie season as an offensive lineman, Tristan Wirfs in 2020 or Rashawn Slater in 2021?
Well, let's see. Did Wirfs won a Super Bowl? So I mean, but that guy, hey, that guy's an absolute unit too. What I would say is, it's not fair to Wirfs, but because Rashawn Slater's playing with Herbert out there and Wirfs is playing with a guy who knows how to get rid of the ball, I would probably give the nod to the left tackle playing the blind side for that offense. But they're both excellent players. But Slater just moves right, and Wirfs just moves right. I love Wirfs' demeanor. Like he's a really special player, and he's on one of those lines because of Jensen in the middle, right? The way that they want to play and get after people. Like they're a fun line to watch. If you're a fan of football and you like watching offensive line play, like that's a fun line to watch because especially that dude in the middle, man, that ginger kid, Ryan Jensen, or I think it's Ryan, he gets after people. Like he got after people when he was in Baltimore. He gets after people now. He's really, really, if you're an old school guy, I love watching that line.
For anyone that ever, for some reason, needs to rewatch the NFC Championship between Tampa and Green Bay, just go watch Ryan Jensen, Kenny Clark. You don't need to watch anything else in that game. Everything else is irrelevant. Go watch Kenny Clark and Ryan Jensen because those two going at it is worth the price of admission and a rewatch in and of itself, because that was one of the more fun matchups I've seen. And speaking of Tom Brady and having him behind, like Ben Fennell always talks about, like how Brady is just an offensive lineman's best friend, because never moves outside of a certain area of the pocket, never gets too deep to allow the edge rushers, balls out of his hands in under 2 seconds more often than not. Like he very much is an offensive lineman's best friend.
Yeah, for sure. If you watch him, I always say that Tom Brady's, he doesn't have the best feet in the business, but he has the best footwork.
Yeah.
And Tom Brady's one of the few guys that can go under center. So the geometry of the game's changed because of the shotgun offense, right? So when you talk about the depth, for example, back in the day, Tom Brady would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plan at 7. He could throw. He didn't even need to hitch. He could hitch, but he didn't need to hitch. Not very many guys can do that. Not many guys have ever even trained themselves to do that. So that's unique in itself, because of the timing of the way those guys run routes. So that's just back to more in New England. But with the shotgun offense, even if he's getting back like Aaron does at 11 yards, 11 and a half yards planting that foot, the geometry of the line changes. So it's not like this like really sharp U anymore where the pocket's collapsing in. It's more like a kind of happy smile face, yeah, where everyone's kind of just settling and playing back. That's why Bakhtiari said it's so special, right? But now with a guy like Brady, it's the same thing as Rodgers, though. I mean, you just understand where your pressure points are, understand who might be a problem. And if you see it early, you can read it before the snap. Ball's gone, doesn't really matter. I can't tell you how many times like Brett, like I got beat and the ball's gone. It's like, too bad. You take the L, but you don't really take the L, and that happens a lot with those guys.
It really, really does. Talk to us about your podcast with Amon Green, because that's been really good stuff as well. And I want to make sure people get over there to check that out.
Oh, appreciate it. Yeah. On my block podcast, Amon, if people don't know, Packers all-time leading rushers, absolute awesome guy. He's an esports guy now. It's actually kind of wild to talk to him about that stuff, but we hit all things Packers every week, review the game. We do a lot of segments that are just kind of old head talk, get off my lawn stuff, and spend a lot of time talking about kind of the trenches and what happens within the box, because that was kind of our areas of expertise. So if people are interested in checking that out, it's the On My Block podcast with AG and myself, and you can check that anywhere you get your podcast, man. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's really great stuff. So for those of you who are enjoying this, trust me, you are going to enjoy Mike and Amon as well. So make sure to check that out. And then Mike, where can we follow you on Twitter?
Yeah, Mike Wahle 68, WAHLE 68 on Twitter, and the Process to Perform on Instagram. Hit me up.
Awesome. Always appreciate you. This is awesome. Enjoy the playoffs this weekend. I know you will. I certainly will be as well. We'll talk about it next week as we start getting ready for the Packers' next opponent. Can't wait to talk to you then. Make sure to follow Mike. You can follow the podcast at Packaday Podcast. You can follow me at Andy Herman NFL. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.